everyone to fill the seats here in the first row. Okay, then I would request someone to bring the colleagues inside. It's very loud here. So, all right, we come to the next session. It's a very important topic. We will speak about the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. I am delighted to have our guests here, and please, the session is yours. Who will start?
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mary Nwara, and I work with GreenFaith. I'm delighted to have this panel here with me. I feel so protected, if you know what I mean. So we're going to talk about the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. It's a mouthful. The fossil fuel industry has caused a lot of havoc, especially that we've seen from the global south and even worldwide. It has issues to do with human rights violations, corruption, food poverty, and a lot of insecurities. So today we want to look at how best can we make sure that we fight against the fossil fuel industry, its related financing, and also the role that each of us play. So it is for this reason that we are behind calling for the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. And to start us off, I would like to introduce my panel, Reverend James Bagwan from the Pacific Churches, Harjit Singh from the Fossil Fuel Treaty Initiative, Henrik Rappe from World Council of Churches, and Nobuyuki Asai from Sokagakai International. Now, to start us off, everybody will have 5 minutes. Harjit. Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty is a mouthful. I had to plan how to pronounce it for a long time. Could you please let us know what Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty is and why is it important? Welcome.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me, and such a pleasure. In fact, let me try, I don't know if some of you were there in the previous session that I was sitting there listening to on the issue of loss and damage. And there was a big decision that came out here, day before yesterday, and of course at COP27. Let me try and connect. This is how I look at it. It took this process 30 years to talk about the cause and consequence of climate change. Can you imagine? We got the convention in 1992. Only in 2021, when we were in Glasgow, there was a brief mention of fossil fuels. Do you know that convention does not have these words, coal, oil, or gas? Not even fossil fuels. Even Paris Agreement does not even mention that. And what has caused the problem in the first place? Fossil fuels. More than 80% of carbon dioxide that exists in the atmosphere is because of fossil fuels, but we don't talk about it. And it's the same industry that has caused havoc, and it's the same industry that is making money off this crisis, when average person in the whole world is suffering, not only from the climate crisis, but now also from the energy crisis, food crisis, biodiversity crisis. And this industry continues to flourish, and this particular system here, UNFCCC, has no response because the agreements have not even dealt with this issue and have actively avoided talking about fossil fuels. And what happened at COP21 was just a brief mention. And here we are in UAE. We want to see that fossil fuel industry is held to account. But Paris Agreement is not sufficient to do that. There's a huge void that exists. So what do we need to do? We need to have a complementary global framework that talks about fossil fuels in a far more holistic manner, because this particular system has failed us. And when we talk about fossil fuel, is a very complex story. On one hand, we have to hold fossil fuel industry to account that is making money, that has caused disinformation, delay, and of course they started with denial. And now what they're doing is deception by offering these so-called technologies which they think is going to fix it. No, it's not. And that's why we have to have a much more comprehensive framework in the form of a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty You can call it fossil fuel treaty if the non-proliferation becomes very complex for you and mouthful, which is going to look at it in a manner where we put the interest of workers and communities right at the heart. Because we know there are countries that are stuck with it. You talk of Nigeria, Colombia, Azerbaijan, Timor-Leste. You can't expect them to immediately shun fossil fuels. And the question that we should also be asking, who made them stuck with that model, which is also a colonial aspect, which we can talk about sometime later. But the fact is, they have been made to stuck with it, and no solution how they are going to move out and how support can be provided. So this particular treaty looks at all those dimensions. And in fact, I came here running. History is being created just a few yards away, where Colombia today is probably going to announce or already announced joining 9 countries, and Palau was the 9th country yesterday, joining those 9 countries. So we are now 10 countries that are calling for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. Because they know that this particular system is not going to deliver. There's too much of politics. The text is consensus-based. One country can actually veto, and we will never get such a process. So you need to have something on the outside that is rock solid, that looks at all the issues. And we have got support from, I'm sure we are going to talk about how faith community is solidly with us, but we have 3,000 scientists, we have 101 Nobel laureates who talked about it. We have got WHO, and in fact WHO is on the panel talking about why fossil fuel treaty is needed. We have health institutions representing millions of workers in the health sector talking about the need for such a treaty. 100 cities, we have hundreds of parliamentarians, you name it, such a groundswell that we have got in support of the treaty, because we now have to fix the problem. And that's how I say we have began to tackle the consequence of climate change with these decisions on loss and damage, but not the cause yet. And this process cannot be relied upon, given the kind of politics and you know the number of lobbyists that are in this space. They will not allow that decision to come through. So that's why we need a support from the faith community, from many such communities, as I said, who are going to be really helping us create that political will, as we are seeing a number of countries coming forward, and also remind them about the ethical, moral dimension to protect this planet. You know, we are the stewards, and I'm sure you will hear more from my co-panelists on the need for it. But that's what we are talking about, and let me finish by saying there are 3 key pillars of this treaty. The ultimate goal is to achieve a global just transition, because we don't want to leave workers and communities on their own, especially in developing countries who need that kind of support through international cooperation. But at the same time, we are calling for an immediate end to new exploration and expansion. Look at most of the expansion is actually happening in rich countries. Such a hypocrisy that we see in this space. You know, you will see them standing on the, sitting on the dais and talking about how they advocate for fossil fuel phase out, but back home they are drilling and digging. So that's one. They can immediately end exploration and expansion now, and then of course we need a plan for a managed decline of fossil fuels so that we can take care of communities and workers. So these are the 3 pillars: stopping all exploration and expansion, phasing out of fossil fuels equitably, and achieving a global just transition. And for that, we need support from all of you to make sure that our leaders listen to this demand and really come forward so that we can have something far more substantive than the kind of lip service that is being played on this particular issue of fossil fuels. Thank you very much.
Right on time, Harjit. Thank you so much. Henrik, why are faith leaders calling for or supporting the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty?
Well, listen to Harjit. I think it's a no-brainer to actually to go for that, because I think that most faiths also has a narrative that is inclusive for both the creation but also a social inclusion. And what I heard before with the WWF, it was much about who is religious and who is not. And I think it's more, what kind of narrative do we follow? Because faith are narratives on what is good and bad in this world, where we want to go to, what we want to achieve. And when we have something that is so monetary based on what development is and what we can do, I think that faith leaders and faith communities must stand up and say, this is not the only value. This is not only monetary value in this world. We have to address the kind of the values of being alive and being together on this earth. And if we have a fossil fuel industry that is still going to get as much profit as they like to do in this situation, when we know that 75% of all the emissions are from fossil fuels, they are wrecking the world. And this is not in the line of the narratives of any religion that you are here to wreck the world. It's not. We should not be there. And another thing that I'm thinking of also from the panel from WWF is that we are so much focused on the individual. You should behavior change. You should change your behavior. But if we don't have laws, if we don't have agreements to actually to rely on, to say, no, we will not extract any more fossil fuels, that is something that we have to adjust to, and not to adjust to saying, I myself had to do this. Faith is about communities. It's not about individuals. It's about going together. And I think that is a strength that faith communities could to come with, to have a counteractive narrative to the ones who are always talking about, because they are smart from the fossil fuel business. They are saying, no, we need to provide this for the poor people of the world. Look, there are so many loss of energy. We need to do this. But we have to counteract that the alternative to go on with fossil fuels will actually make all people in a dreadful position. So we can do so much more in this. I think my friend James will have much more good to say about this. But please go ahead, do something on this fossil fuel industry. We have to really face down. Even in this COP, when we applied for the side events, we tried to put theme phase out fossil fuel, but the only thing that come up was phase down. So even the wording of the COP is going in a direction to keep things going in the way that the business want to be. And as Harjeet said, there will be people saying, oh, we will phase out fossil fuels, oh, we will do that, we will build nuclear or something else wrecking thing that they are thinking of. But they're still drilling, they're still not doing it. So we need this kind of things. And I just throw this in as well. The fossil fuel is actually doing ecocide to the world. And that is so combined. So we have this faith for ecocide law. I have 3 here, so anyone who wants to have it can grab it as soon as possible. That is also addressed. We need this kind of laws that protect people, that protect the nature and protect the coming generations to have a decent life on this planet. And any faith who are not addressing this, they are not faith. They are not faith. They are not doing what they're supposed to be as faith. They are a kind of hobby for middle-class people. Sorry to say that.
Thank you so much, Henrik. Given that you have 1 minute to your time, I have a follow-up question. So what is the ask from a reverend? What would you ask your fellow faith leaders to do regarding calling for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty?
Well, I need them to, if they haven't divested, do it now. If they have rich churches, do all your investment in the new solutions. Don't talk about climate justice if you're still investing in fossil fuels, because you are just giving the money to those who drill more. So keep out of it and do it. Say everyone else to follow.
Thank you so much. Coming to you, James. You have been in the forefront of calling for loss and damage. We've heard the Pacific churches saying the floods are not the act of God. People should not blame themselves. So my question to you is, why is the Pacific churches supporting the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty?
Thank you. These are our people up on the screen. We are people with deep relationship, and we are connected from an indigenous point of view, but from a spiritual point of view with the land and the sea. For us, there is still a sacred web that binds ecology, economy, and spirituality together. Our people and many indigenous people around the world are people who only take what they need. They share when we have abundance. We have that practice of abundance. We have that practice of deep respect for nature. When a child is born, and you'll see our mamas there with babies, when the umbilical cord drops off, we bury that with a coconut tree or an indigenous tree. And that reminds us that we are part of the land. And as that tree grows, so we grow. That's our connection. And we try as much as possible to move lightly on the land. Our faith is one that embraces that spirituality and that relationship. From a Christian perspective, we are part of creation. We are not separate from it. But this is our reality. Rising sea levels, droughts, floods. For 2 decades, or more than 2 decades, we've been on the forefront of the impacts of climate change, which threaten our livelihoods, which threaten our way of life, threaten our history and culture. And for us, loss of land means loss of identity. It means loss of sovereignty. Tuvalu just 3 weeks ago, or 4 weeks ago, signed almost their security arrangements to Australia in return for 250 people to migrate every year to Australia because of rising sea levels. We are surrendering our identity and our sovereignty. And so for us, that loss equals loss of life. You know, that's our reality that you see. This gentleman on the bottom right-hand corner is pointing out to what used to be their cemetery for their community. When we have to relocate, these are what we have to leave behind as a result of climate change. And this is what we are facing every day. And it's not just the rising sea levels or warming seas. Our extreme weather that affects us in huge ways, because we are, as much as we would like to call ourselves large ocean states, we are practically small island states. So when cyclones and tsunamis and ocean surges, waves from spring tides and king tides affect us, they affect us in huge ways. And for people who are not, as I said, we are deeply connected to the land. This is not just in terms of disaster. This is deeply traumatic because the land that we are a part of is being destroyed. As I speak today, there is a cyclone forming in our Pacific Ocean. This weekend, the 3rd tropical cyclone in the Pacific in a month will be affecting one of our island countries. So I'm speaking from a place of deep concern for my people because we are running out of time. We are still asking for funds for adaptation, let alone the loss and damage fund that's been approved. The pledges are coming far too slow and far too small. And nobody wants to talk, as we've heard, about mitigation, about the phase out. And so for the Pacific churches, what we have said is that unless there is a commitment to phase out fossil fuel, adaptation funds, loss and damage funds is basically blood money. From a Christian perspective, we say that's 30 pieces of silver at the risk for our lives. And so we need movement on the phase out, and for us, the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty is key to that. It's a key step in that. So the Pacific churches have endorsed this. Our Pacific countries were among the first to endorse that. We have, numbers increasing now in terms of countries endorsing. And we worked with the World Council of Churches, and the World Council of Churches has also endorsed the Fossil Fuel Treaty. And we're hoping that the Vatican will come on board eventually, and that other faith communities will join in that sense of mobilizing the faith community, not just individuals, but communities together, as 80% of the global population, which I've heard so many times in this pavilion. If we're not doing the change that needs to happen, then we are failing creation and we are failing each other. So we need people to sign on to the treaty. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm moving all the way to Japan. And Nobuyuki, it will be interesting to hear why Sokagakai International is endorsing or would endorse the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Yeah, I'm Nobuyuki Asai from Sokagakai International, or SGI. Originally, Alexandra, a very fantastic woman, was to be to speak at this event, but her mother passed away yesterday morning, so now she's flying back to Geneva now. So instead of her, now I'm speaking now. So SGI is a community-based Buddhist organization. So my appearance might be different from the typical image of Buddhism, but we are from the Mahayana Buddhist tradition, and it is very prevalent in East Asia. And we are promoting peace, culture, and education activities. And our a couple of our golden rules or basic concepts. One of them is the dignity of life, and we believe in the infinite potential within ourselves. And also, the other is don't build your own happiness sacrificing others' happiness. So several decades ago, we were not aware that fossil fuels brought harms to other people. So in reality, many of our members also were worked in mine companies as well, and also we continue to rely on fossil fuels in our daily lives. But now we are aware that fossil fuels are harmful to the earth, and in particular to the people in the global south. So in that sense, we cannot continue to rely on fossil fuels now. And when I initially heard about the concept of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, I was reminded of the Nuclear Weapon Non-Proliferation Treaty, because we have promoted activities for that cause over the decades. And our former president, Daisaku Ikeda, who passed away just last month, released many proposals for the nuclear weapon issues. And one of them was released in 2009, and I would like to quote one phrase from his proposal. So if we are to put the era of nuclear terror behind us, we must struggle against the real enemy. That enemy is not nuclear weapons policy, nor is it the states that possess or develop them. The real enemy that we must confront is the ways of thinking that justify nuclear weapons, that readiness to annihilate others. So I think this applies to the issue of climate change or fossil fuel as well. So as a Buddhist, we'd like to build a sustainable and harmonious world. And I believe this treaty makes a huge difference in this journey. And we have endorsed the petition for the treaty, and we are determined to make more efforts to achieve the sustainable world. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nobuyuki. At this point in time, I would like to open it to the floor because we've had very powerful speeches as to why we are calling for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. And so questions, I'll take 2 or 3 questions. But before then, Harjit mentioned that Nigeria is now stuck, reeling in the consequences of oil drilling from decades. And we also say that without stopping the fossil fuel industry, we will not have a future for any generation to inherit. At this case in time, I would like us to hear for 3 minutes from my colleague from Nigeria, Aliyu Sadiq, who is a young digital activist and also a Muslim, on how the fossil fuel industry has affected their community.
Thank you so much. My name is Aliyu Sadiq. Okay. All right, so my name is Aliyu Sadiq, and I'm a young digital activist from Nigeria. I have been in the activism right from grassroots stage for about 5 years now. And one thing that has been really, really devastating is the issue of the oil spill, the fossil fuels, which I appreciate the fact that our faith leaders have brought it from various views, the religious angle, the injustice angle, the part of human rights abuse, and this is practical in Nigeria, in a region that has practically been turned to trash due to oil spill and fossil fuel exploitation for the last 6 decades. This has become a source of the nation's revenue without the consideration of the consequences that it has had on the people, that it has had on the culture, it has had on the conscience, as well as even you have people who have migrated, people whom their water sources have become polluted, that they cannot drink water, they have to migrate. You have people who have been farmers, but they can no longer farm on their natural soils that they were given birth to. And this has brought about huge injustice that remains the same way it has remained. Nobody is saying anything about it. Communities cannot make a voice, cannot shout, because the government is making a lot of money from it. They do not care. And even when you have issues of cleaning up the oil spill that has happened, you have just shallow, like the Reverend here said, shallow political cleaning up that you have nothing bringing back or reclaiming back their livelihoods. We have had a lot of engagement with these community leaders, faith leaders, young people, indigenous people. And it's so disheartening that based on the UNEP reports, their life expectancy is 45. So it means that people, indigenous people of this community, because of the increasing oil and fossil fuel exploitation in this community, even their lives have been threatened. And this is not something that can be reclaimed. So the issue about loss and damage, where he mentioned that it's not about the economy, you can see this is reality. It now has to do with life, it has to do with livelihood, it has to do with culture. And this is a sad reality, a reality that has become the situation of communities somewhere in the Niger Delta parts of Nigeria. And today we have more discoveries of oil in other parts of Nigeria, with the governments beginning to think of exploiting more. So what's the fate of these communities? They are scared of what happened in Niger Delta not to happen to them. My state is one of them, Nasarawa State. Oil has been discovered, and they're making effort to begin exploitation. So if we have loss and damage funds while these communities continue to perish, I think it's really not justice, it is injustice. Thank you for the opportunity.
Three questions before we wrap up. Any questions? I will take the first three. All right. We have the first one here, and then the second one at the back, and then the third one. All right, good.
Thank you, Maureen, and thank you to everyone. A number of you have spoken about the moral and ethical elements, and I'm wondering if you could comment in really strategic and climate movement terms about what the potency of interfaith work is there.
Do you want to send that to anyone or just?
Anyone who wants to respond, I think.
Okay. James, do you want to respond now? Okay.
I think just when you look at the sheer number of faith communities that are engaging and signing on to the treaty and supporting it and advocating for it, I think you can see very clearly there the role of faith communities working together. And as I said earlier, we need to harness that. So it's important for us to sign on, but then we need to use that goodwill and move our countries, move our communities, move the businesses of our members of our faith communities to start engaging in this. And it's about a just transition, really, and that's the strategic element. I'm from a maritime area. We need to travel on the ocean, but we need to find a way to shift to sustainable sea transport. So that's our strategy. And we need the rest of the world to step into those ways of thinking. But we cannot do it alone. We cannot do it in our faith silos. Thank you.
If I can quickly add, and absolutely what Reverend said, let's understand the kind of trust that faith community has of people, and having that moral call that why this treaty is important. Because politicians claim that they are looking at the best interest of people, but the reality is that they are siding with the fossil fuel industry. When faith community comes forward and says, this is in the best interest of people and the planet, that's what we want. So it's a moral call, but very strategic, because it's talking about the direction that we have to take as humanity and as this world. So there's a very strong moral dimension, yet it is strategic because it's talking about agreeing to a mechanism, a framework that's going to take us out of this addiction to fossil fuels and have something far more concrete and achieving that green and sustainable world.
The second question was behind somewhere. I can't see him anymore. I think he's stepped out. So we can come here.
Thank you all, the really great speeches, all of them. I'm Liz from the Catholic Agency for Overseas Development. This question might be one for Harjeet, but open to any views. I'm just wondering what the specific theory of change is as to how this movement gets eventually to the phase out of fossil fuels. Like what, at this COP, the next COP, outside of the COP process, what are the processes that we need to get into to finally get to a phase out? Thank you.
Who wants to take that? Okay, Henrik?
Yeah, please give it a shot.
You have a mic on the other side.
Thank you. Sorry for that. I think the theory of change is, the problem is we have all the political instruments. I mean, we have this UNFCCC, we have the Paris Agreement, we have all the science we need, but why isn't it happening? One theory that I, of course, got from the faith community is that we don't have a value base for asking the question, why? Why should we? If we only have the monetary say, why? Because we will lose money, nobody will do it. But if the why is we want to protect the coming generation, it is in our DNA to be protective and to the world we live of, then that kind of value-based shift is important to actually have the theory of change. And the other part, I think, is looking for what happened in, for example, in EU, when you were not allowed to produce any light bulbs of the old-fashioned way. And of course, oldies like me thought that was so bad, all the new ones are bad. But switching over to LED by laws actually pulled people to efficient use of energy. It made a huge difference. Instead of just saying, you should act differently, you should act differently. We need laws that help us to go in the right way. That is also a theory of change. But still, it's money who is ruling the business all the time. And I think faith communities must stand up, say, it's not only economic values that give our life pleasures, it's something else.
Thank you. Arjit, you want to add? Because I think our time is up. Yeah, you can add in a minute.
Sure. So, of course, we have a multi-pronged strategy. Let me explain. What's happening right now, or happened just now, 10 countries coming together calling for a treaty. That was one diplomatic engagement we had, working very closely with Pacific nations and nations who are feeling the heat of climate change. But at the same time, there are countries who are stuck with fossil fuels and they need a mechanism. But this system or other governments would not listen to unless there is a groundswell. So what we did over the last 3 years, exactly this, faith community, health community, human rights organizations and individuals coming forward and scientific community, Nobel laureates calling for it. So you create that groundswell which will then, demand that political will so that leaders would think that, oh, they are going to sign on to something which people are demanding, which has been vetted by them. And that is a theory of change that we are using to land at a point where we get the treaty. But then you also need to make sure that money starts flowing, and then a lot of engagement will be needed at the local, national level. So that's why the groundswell that we have, which is more in the form of a campaign, that has to result into something which then gets implemented, and basically setting up accountability measures from local to global levels. So that's the strategy that we are taking, working with our allies and partners.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. for listening in, and thank you, my panelists, for giving us the reasons as to why we are saying faiths for Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. And as I leave you, I'd like to just mention a few quotes that I've gathered from the panelists. Cause and consequences. You pollute, you pay up. We should not only look at the money. Sometimes money is not enough. Tell me how you'll enjoy your money when you're so sick and bedridden. If we pollute the land, then we are polluting ourselves because we are our land. And the last one is that the thinking that we need to dismantle is the thinking of harming others at the expense of our own greed. Thank you all, and please help me in appreciating the panelists.
Thank you so much. We have a small break, and then we continue with the topic of landscape restoration. And I would request and invite everyone, here's the barcode. Give us feedback so that we can learn from you. Here's the barcode. Please use it. Thank you.